Hey there. Today, let's dive into something you've probably heard a million times, that babies only become afraid of heights once they start crawling. It sounds right, it feels like it should be true, but the real story, well, it's way more fascinating.
So let's just start with the biggest question right off the bat. Are we born afraid of heights? For a really long time, the answer was a simple no, but it came with this really interesting catch.
And that catch was this. The fear isn't something we're born with, but it's something we learn. And specifically, we learn it from crawling. The whole idea was that the bumps and tumbles that come with figuring out how to move around for the first time, well, they teach a baby that falling is bad, and so heights must be scary.
Now, this idea didn't just pop out of thin air. Nope, it came from one of the most famous experiments in the entire history of developmental psychology. It was called the visual cliff, and it was a brilliantly simple setup. It's basically a big, sturdy glass table. On one side, it looks perfectly shallow, but on the other, it looks like a terrifying, steep drop-off. The key thing to remember, though, is that it was all an illusion. That glass was completely solid all the way across.
So the experiment itself was really straightforward. You take a baby who knows how to crawl, place them right in the middle, and have their mom stand on the other side of that scary-looking deep end, encouraging them to come on over. The question was just, would they do it?
And, well, the results seem to prove everything. While babies who were brand new to crawling might go for it, the ones with just a few weeks to practice under their belts, they overwhelmingly said no thank you. They'd crawl right up to the edge of that visual cliff and just stop cold.
Yeah, the original observers noted just how decisively the babies would avoid that drop. It really looked like they could see the depth and knew it was dangerous. The conclusion just felt obvious.
And just like that, a scientific finding turned into a cultural fact. It made perfect sense, right? Babies crawl, they learn about falling, and poof, they become afraid of heights. Case closed. Except it wasn't. Not even close.
So years later, researchers like Dr. Karen Adolph started taking a closer look at that original experiment. And you know what? They started to notice some problems with that nice, neat story.
Dr. Adolph pointed out this huge flaw in the logic, which was completely circular. Think about it. We say babies avoid the drop because they're afraid of heights. And how do we know they're afraid of heights? Because they avoid the drop. The argument just chases its own tail. And this opens up a massive question. What if fear wasn't the reason at all? When the new researchers actually went back and watched the old tapes, they saw something amazing. The babies didn't look scared. They weren't crying or freaking out. They were curious. They were exploring the edge, patting the glass. They weren't afraid, they were just uncertain. They needed more information. And where does a baby go when they need more information? They look to their parents. It's this super important developmental stage called social referencing. An infant literally looks at their caregiver's face to figure out how they should feel about something new. Is this stranger a friend? Is that loud noise okay? They are reading the room by reading our faces. And this is where it all clicks into place. When researchers reran the experiment, but this time they told the moms what face to make, the results were stunning. If the mother looked joyful and encouraging, most of the babies crossed right over. But if she put on a fearful or angry face, almost none of them would budge. You see, the babies weren't reacting to the height, they were reacting to their mom's reaction.
Okay, so if it's not a fear of heights, what is going on? What are babies actually learning? Well, it turns out it's not one big lesson. Dr. Adolph's incredible research shows that they're constantly relearning about the world through 4 totally distinct stages of movement.
It turns out babies are like these amazing little scientists. They're not learning one big, simple, emotional lesson like fear. Instead, they're constantly running experiments and updating their data on what their body can do in relation to the world around them. And here's the wild part. This learning process has to start over, completely from scratch, with every new motor skill. A baby might totally master judging gaps when they're sitting up, but the second they start crawling, it's like their brain just hits a reset button. They'll crawl right over a drop they would have known to avoid as a sitter. And the same thing happens when they learn to cruise along furniture. And then it happens all over again when they learn to walk.
As Dr. Adolph herself puts it, if this was really about a fear of heights, you just be afraid of heights. That fear should carry over from one skill to the next. You shouldn't see 4 separate learning curves. They aren't learning to be afraid. They're learning to perceive what's possible with their current transportation system.
So this whole process is incredible, right? It shows how a baby's brain learns to see the world through physical interaction. But it turns out that same physical interaction is also absolutely essential for how our eyes physically develop. And this brings us to a huge modern challenge, the skyrocketing rate of nearsightedness in kids.
Okay, let's just simplify what's going on in this slide. A major theory in vision science is that our actual eyeballs physically grow based on where we look. So, when we spend tons of time focusing up close, say on a phone or a tablet, light hits the back of our eye in a way that basically tells it to grow longer. But when we focus on stuff far away, like when we're playing outside, the light sends a totally different signal, one that tells the eye to stop growing. It's a physical change based on our environment.
And that process, the eyeball physically stretching out and getting longer, that is exactly what myopia, or nearsightedness, is. It's not just that you need glasses, it's a condition where the actual shape of your eye has changed, making things far away look blurry. And that change is directly influenced by those focus signals we were just talking about.
So why is this so critical right now? Because the projections are staggering. By the year 2050, it's expected that nearly half, almost 50% of the entire world's population will have myopia. This is a massive public health crisis, and it's rooted in the way our eyes fundamentally develop.
So, let's bring it all back home, back to our baby at the edge of that cliff. What have we really learned about what's going on inside that tiny brain?
The old myth was pretty simple and all about emotion. Crawling teaches fear. But the reality is so much cooler. Babies are these incredible little scientists. They're constantly running experiments, collecting data, and learning really specific perceptual skills for every single new way they learn to get around. It's not about fear at all. It's about knowledge.
And that really leaves us with a pretty profound final thought. We've seen how learning is deeply physical, right? It's tied to a child actually exploring the real, three-dimensional world. It shapes their brain's map of space, and it even shapes the physical growth of their eyes. So what happens in a world that is more and more dominated by flat screens? How does swapping a backyard for a tablet shape not just a developing mind, but a developing body? That's a question we're thinking about. Thanks for joining me.